This is Meridian FM.
Thank you for joining me on Success Express. And as trailed on X yesterday, I'm joined today by Pippa Tanko from And Pip. So, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me, Claire. It's lovely to be here.
Right, and you live locally, don't you?
I do. I'm in East Grinstead. Can you believe it? So just round the corner.
Brilliant. Okay, let's catch up shortly. Wonderful track there from Eagle Eye Cherry and Save Tonight. And Pippa was bopping around there and saying it reminded you of your ancient home, Pippa.
Yes, absolutely. So it reminded me of my roots of where I grew up. I grew up in South Africa, and I think that song came out in the 90s when I was still at school. So it just reminded me of that time.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, so great title for a business, And Pip. Tell us just a little bit about the business before we really dig into how it all started.
Sure, absolutely. So And Pip is a strategic agency that helps businesses tell their visual story. And we do that through photography and videography, but it's very led from a brand strategy point of view. Yeah. So we look at how we can actually generate results for a business through the imagery, not just look pretty.
So when it comes to people that want to create or they're updating their websites, presumably you feed into that part of it?
Absolutely. Actually, the work that we do comes prior to them building the site so that we can actually understand the brand. We can understand what they're trying to achieve, who they are, but also who they're trying to attract. And that is a very important piece that lots of people actually miss. Amazing.
So how did it all begin for you? What were you were out in South Africa. Okay, what did you, I've got a sense here, you've got quite a story to tell.
Well, actually, when I left school, I actually wanted to be a nurse. I'd wanted to be a nurse. My mum was a nurse. My father had passed away as a baby, and so I felt like I wanted to go out there and save lives and do this big thing. And in practice, it was a very different I suppose.
Life had another road.
It had another road for me, and I think I had built it up in my head to be something that was very different to what I was expecting. So I actually left and studied graphic design, and I've always been the only creative in a very academic family. So that was a big part of my story, and I think I had gone down the nursing route mostly just to please my family, and then realized that it wasn't actually what I wanted it to be, and it wasn't filling my cup. And so I decided it was time to look into my creative side. And so I went and worked and studied through a printing company, and we did 3D animation and imagery and printing and design.
And is this still out in SA, or is this once you?
This was still in South Africa. So when I qualified, I left and came to the UK, and that was 26 years ago. And I had just come for a year to travel. It was kind of my gap year, right? But my grandparents were British, so I had roots here. And after a year, I just felt like I hadn't done enough of what I wanted to do. So I thought I'd stay. And because my grandparents were British, that was an opportunity for me. And so I stayed, and then I met my husband, who's European, and so we are still here on neutral ground.
Wow, amazing. And so how did these ideas sort of formulate? What was your first role after you'd studied all the graphic stuff?
So I really came to London very green, from a small town in South Africa, although I did study in Cape Town. And so I kind of bopped around a little bit. I was always been very good at kind of IT and using computers, and I'd done that quite a lot in the courses that I'd done, and I'd actually studied business economics as well alongside graphics. I always felt like I was going to run my own business one day, and so I kind of bopped around doing various different roles, trying to find my feet, and I really struggled, honestly, initially to find a role in the creative industries that would still support me, because I had no family support at all. I was literally on my own. I had to do everything myself. So it took a little while for me to find my feet. And I actually was working in a management consultancy firm. When I lost my job, I got fired. That's a whole nother story.
Oh my God, what were you doing there?
So I was doing IT help desk support. Yes.
Right, yes. I know it well. Yeah.
But yes, it's a whole nother story. It sounds way worse than it was, but I did lose my job, and with that, my confidence. And only after that did I decide to jump into running a business and building a business. And so that was in 2004.
Right.
So 4 years after arriving in the UK.
How did the ideas formulate about the business that you were going to run?
Well, I think I'd always been surrounded by photography my entire life. I come from a family of photographers, and my cousin, who is a lot older than me, had taught me a lot about photography, and we had spent a lot of time together growing up. My mum was a single parent, so she'd ship me off to my cousins for a while, and I would just follow him around. And so I picked up a lot about photography, and there are a lot of, I think there are about 3 or 4 people in my family are all photographers in different countries. So I feel like that was in my veins already from when I was a child. And I actually remember the first time I ever saw an image being developed in a darkroom when I was 12 years old.
That must have been fascinating.
And I thought it was magic,
Well, yes, you would, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
Because
watching a white piece of paper turn into something.
Else.
Absolutely.
Wow, that is amazing. Right, well, we'll get back to that in just a minute. So, Pippa, let's get back. You were following your uncle around, who was a fantastic photographer, so you've really always been into that image stuff.
Yes, and so he actually moved to the UK around a similar time as me, and I went up and worked with him for a year, helping him run his business. So he had a fast food chain. He also did photography on the side. So I did a little bit of everything just to help out, but mostly I was doing the graphic design and the kind of business side of things for him and for the businesses. And so when I did come back down to London and I did lose my job, it felt like I was already planning to start a business and become a photographer. It was already on the cards. I'd already bought some of the equipment and was kind of gearing up, doing that alongside my job. So when I did lose my job, it just felt like a natural progression of what I should do. And so I launched into initially a family and baby photography business because that was what I knew. And it was quite easy. I've always been very good with children. And so I started off kind of in that area. And then I got headhunted to go and help manage the photography for Harrods and the imagery. And so I spent a lot of time working more on the strategic side of how we set shoots up, how we create visual styles. And so really, I did that for a couple of years before then launching into the branding and
Fascinating though, working for Harrods.
Absolutely, it was really interesting.
Such a huge, diverse conglomerate thing.
Yes, mostly I was involved with their online presence and how we build their online presence and how we capture the brands, because obviously they work with multiple fashion brands, and so all the imagery had to align with the right brand but still have a Harrods luxury feel. So I was really involved in how we created that feel for the images.
And of course it's mega today, but what is so surprising about it, and you will know it really, really well, I was up there a few months ago with a friend, and we were just walking around, and it was just like a giant showroom, and nobody was buying anything unless you were in the food hall. And downstairs buying all the little, all the stuff that the tourists get. But when you go up through the other floors and you look at all the fabulous stuff, most of it wasn't being touched at all. It amazes me how it's survived.
Yes, absolutely. I think they do have...
do they have a big online business?
I think they have big online business as well.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ordering. And that's not just from the UK. People,
it's global.
It's global. And so I do think people go into stores sometimes, but I think a lot of it is now done online. It's just the age that we're living in.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're done at Harrods, we move away. What comes next?
So then I launched my business as a strategic photographer, and I started looking at working more with brands and how I could take the knowledge that I had gained from working with various different brands at Harrods and use that.
Would also know you as well.
Yes. And use that to help smaller businesses grow and develop a visual style for their business.
And so how do you put that together? I've had a look at your website. It's amazing. How do you start? I know you said you take the images, obviously, before someone builds their website, because it's your input that goes into that along with lots of other stuff. So how does it all begin?
Well, first we would start with strategy, and what that looks like is actually sitting down and really understanding the business. So who their ideal client or customer base is, what are their aspirations, what are their goals, what are they looking for, what are their pain points and problems, and how does the business solve those or provide that outcome for them. And so we really dig deep into who their client and their customer is. The next stage is kind of the opposite. This becomes more about the business. Who is the business? What are their values? What do they stand for? Because I think the problem is that there's so many businesses that are trying to be something for everyone, and when you do that from a market, exactly, and what happens is that their messaging becomes really diluted in the market and samey as everybody else. Whereas if you can be really strategic and hone in on one specific customer profile to begin with, and then your values, your personality, and really showcase that and link those together, that's where it becomes a bit of a powerhouse. And then you can add other customer profiles and personas after you've really niched on one, and use different ways to channel your marketing to those different ICPs.
And you do that all through imagery?
Well, we start with doing that through understanding it all. Then how can we use imagery to support that? How can we use imagery, because a picture speaks 1,000 words, as we all know, right? And so how do you get them to feel, your customer to feel a certain way when they look at an image? How do you get them to understand what your values are? How do you align it with the wording that goes maybe on your website or in your social media, or when you're actually out there in the world networking and speaking to businesses? How does it actually showcase you as a brand and build that perception that you're trying to build?
So that's the first step. That's the strategy. What comes next?
So then we would look at things like creating a visual style for a brand. So this comes in the form of doing lots of mood boarding, and we take everything we've gained from the strategy and we've learned from the strategy, and we take that and we pull that into mood boarding. So the way that I look at this is in the seasons, right? You might get a brand that's quite earthy and warm, and that says a certain thing about that brand. Or you might get one that's quite spring-like, it's light and bright. Or you might get one that's quite outspoken and bold and colourful, and so we're going with more bold kind of photography. Or you might get someone that's a little bit more moody and edgy, and that's our winter palette. So we're looking at things like grain, locations like brickwork and metal work that might come into that, even if we're photographing people. That's fascinating, because I can imagine lots of our listeners, the uninitiated, won't know what mood boards are. But you've just explained them, and I really well. And I saw that when I looked at your website. You had lots of shots, but descriptions after each one: commercial, funky. Absolutely. And how, you might get a brand that's really disruptive. How do you show that brand is disruptive? Or you might have a brand that's really caring and nurturing. How do we show that care and nurture through the imagery that we put out there? How do we showcase that through the brand?
And how would you showcase a brand where quality, and thinking about some of the more artisan stuff like carpenters and people that build very ornate stuff, how would you get that quality feel across? Well,
I think it comes across in the richness of an image.
Right.
It's difficult to put into words. Yes. I would use things like really minimalistic imagery that really highlighted the element of whatever it was you were trying to highlight, whether that's a product or a craft of a craftsman creating something. But what we're really trying to do is create all those images that tell the story of a business. So it might be images of the products themselves. It might be images of the craft craftsmanship, but we would have this really consistent style across all of them. And we would create that luxury through the way that we would light those images, the way that we would tone those images, and so we use different techniques for different looks and feels.
Wow, so we've got the strategy in place, we've got that feel around what they're all about and that where they are as a business. What comes next?
Yes, and then we've developed the ideas and the imagery, but then what comes next is we'll move on to planning the shoot.
Right, okay. And where do the shoots take place generally?
So it really depends on the look and feel we're trying to go for. So I work all over the world. I'm in Europe quite often, but when I'm in the UK, we're really looking for locations that will suit the brand. Sometimes it's on location, on their location.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll look for or source specific locations. For example, if we're looking for something quite edgy, industrial looking, then I might go, right, where in London has got that edgy industrial feel? Okay, we'll go to this area. Or if we're looking for something more corporate, where in London looks more corporate? And how can we bring in different elements?
Wow. So after the shoot, or the shoots, because you could do a number.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes. So then we have the shoots, and then what we do is we go through the editing process, obviously. Yeah. We look at how we can really bring in that warmth to the imagery, and so that's called color profiling. We'll look at the color profiling of the images, and then a gallery will be submitted to the client for them to see.
I would call them contacts. That's
like the contacts, for example. But usually we would book a call, we'd sit down, we'd go through, we'd talk about them, and we'd talk about where these images would be suitable to use. So that comes in the strategy as we've maybe looked at, okay, they're looking for website images or online images.
And what's important there is that the customer and the client needs to not just go, well, they have that. It's that.
Yes, well, they actually get all the images that I take. That's how I work. But it's the guidance on how you then go away and use these images, especially where we see that there are teams, because there is a certain way that images should be used. And so we talk about that, but we would then provide them with a guide so that when the team grows or they get a new team member in, someone else is doing maybe the social media or the marketing, they have got a visual guide that they think, right, this is how we use these images. This is how we use these other images. They're for different purposes. Yeah. And this is what we'd never do. We'd never crop an image like this. So we give them a guide on what the do's and don'ts are really with the imagery in order to make sure we're aligning it with that strategy from the beginning. All the way through.
And coming back to that. So where from there? We're there, aren't we?
We're pretty much there. We do have an ongoing support service where we meet up once a month to discuss any ongoing needs. Some businesses are evolving and changing, and they need ongoing support with imagery. Maybe they are starting to get into public speaking as one we're seeing a lot of at the moment. And so they need a photographer to come along and support taking some image of them doing public speaking. Or maybe there's another side of the business that they're developing, or they're adding a new persona into the business, and so we would look at that ongoing support. Sometimes they need those monthly calls, sometimes those end up being quarterly, and sometimes they will just we'll wait a couple of months and we'll go back.
And do you notice the trends within businesses where you suddenly get a number perhaps contacting you and they're all of a similar type? Or
so I tend to work mostly with the founders of businesses that are looking for growth. So I think my marketing really speaks to those founders. And so I tend to get those kind of inquiries coming in. A lot of the leads that I generate myself are when I've actually been able to speak to someone. So I do a lot of public speaking. Yes. I put on a lot of workshops to help educate people on the power of imagery. And so I forget your question, but I think that's answered
Yes, I was talking about, have you noticed any trends in the sorts of people that contact you looking for your work?
Yeah, I think not so much trends in the people looking for my work, but because I work mostly in creative industries and people that make or create something, because I work a lot in the construction industry as well. Yes, so I think it's people that really buy into this. We know imagery is powerful. How can we use it better? Because what I see a lot, Claire, is so many businesses think they've got great imagery, but it's so rubbish. Samey. It's so samey as everybody else's.
And they need something that's going to stand out.
And differentiate them in a very crowded marketplace, especially now online with things like AI coming into play. It's more important than ever. And what we're seeing now, I suppose, as a trend is that trust is becoming very important in the era of AI.
Absolutely.
So having those authentic images are really powerful in building trust.
Yes, and of course that's the byword for quality. You have trust.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so in a sense yours is a very bespoke service, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I actually only work with a handful of clients, 2 to 3 clients a month. Because I give this very bespoke service and I want to be able to do the best I can do. And creativity doesn't just turn on like a tap, you need to have this headspace and the time to really be creative. And so I'm very aware that there are a lot of businesses out there trying to do creative services, but they are taking on so much work that actually they start to lose that creativity. And I don't want that for myself or for the clients. I want to be able to deliver the best possible service I can.
Amazing. What an intriguing story. Well, let's just delve into it a little bit more in just a moment. So, Pippa, what an amazing story. I'm really fascinated with your business, but for the future, what's up next?
Well, I've got a lot of things on the go. So I run a community of creatives where I help them really support them in their business growth and development. And these are probably lower end businesses that are just trying to pivot in some way, shape or form. They're kind of just feels like they're starting out all over again. And so that's an ongoing project where I'm supporting. I do a lot of mentoring of young businesses, young creatives. But I think my biggest project at the moment is I'm in the middle of writing my first book.
And what's the subject matter?
Do you know, it's really interesting. People ask me that all the time. I think it's taking all of the things I've spoken about today and putting them into a book so anybody could use some of the strategies that I use to help businesses. They could use it for themselves. And I haven't really put a label on it yet. So I've spent a year kind of freestyle writing, and now we're in the process of trying to make it into what I call the first ugly rough draft. And so I'm about, I'd say 60% of the way through that.
Brilliant.
So I try and write every day, every morning.
Wow.
Not always successfully, but what I say to myself is I just need to write one bad sentence a day. And one bad sentence invariably turns into a good one. And then a sentence turns into a paragraph, which turns into a page. And I try and never finish at the end of a chapter. I always try and start the next chapter. So when I come back to it the next day, I'm in flow. It's already alive.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. For
Amazing.
2026.
Amazing. Fantastic to meet you. You live in East Grinstead, don't you?
That's right. I live in East Grinstead, but as I said, I work all over the UK and Europe.
And Europe.
Yes. Actually, last year I got to go to the US for a shoot for the first time, which was a lot of fun. I spent a bit more. So I actually, I flew into Atlanta and I did the shoot in a town called Columbus, and then, which is where Coca-Cola actually was discovered by a pharmacist, which I learned while I was there. And we did the shoot there, but we doubled up because there was a creative convention called Creative South, which we attended after the shoot. So I did the shoot and then I attended that, and I had a friend come and join me. So it ended up being quite a fun trip. A bit long and exhausting. I think my husband was ready for me to get home with the kids after a week away, but that was a lot of fun. But often I'm just in Europe kind of for a day or two.
Fascinating. So what I'll do is I'm going to put all your contact information up on the net afterwards. You're on Instagram as well, aren't you?
I'm on Facebook, Instagram, but probably my biggest platform is LinkedIn.
Right.
So that is where people can reach out to me if anyone is looking to reach out. LinkedIn will be the place that I'm most present, although I am on all three.
Okay, so I'll pop those up a little bit later on. What a fabulous story.
Thank you, Claire. It's been so lovely chatting to you.
To meet you. You'll have to come back, revisit, and let us know how it all goes. Fabulous.